Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. So this video is about Trumpian psychopathy and the coronavirus. Now, I'm obviously not a psychiatrist, psychologist, just as a general reader, can barely skim the surface of this topic, but it doesn't take much to observe some psychopathic traits, and I've got no qualifications in the field. I could be dead wrong, and if you are qualified in the field, please point out where I'm wrong. Unlike Donald Trump, I welcome admonition. So he dithered for so long over coronavirus. Is that culpable homicide? Well, it reminds me of Benjamin Shapiro's book, The People versus Obama, saying that Obama ought to be prosecuted over various things like the Benghazi raid, which of course, in which Americans were killed by people in Libya, saying you need some things, you need people to be killed, you need there to be some sort of duty to protect, and then you need a failure to act, and blah, 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 when it's reasonable to do so. Now, obviously I'm not a lawyer, particularly not in the United States, but it's making me think, is there any sort of similar claim to be made against Donald Trump? Because I realise it's a disease that is killing people, but he was warned it was going to happen. Is the federal government's responsibility? No, they can't keep the body count down to zero. Nobody suggested that. No country's going to manage that. But they could reduce it somewhat. And if it's not the federal government's duty, why is he acting at all? Why is everyone urging him to act? And why is he claiming to be acting about this? So he has behaved flagitiously on this one, as he has on so many other issues. Always banging on about America being the greatest. Well, I suppose in a way it is. Greatest to mean in the sense of biggest, the truest and original meaning of great, not excellent, insofar as it's had over 1,000 deaths in one day, which no other country in the world has managed. So, woo, well done, Donald. You know, you really have excelled yourself. He certainly is a high achiever. He's a numbers guy. He likes bragging about those high figures. You know, China, with over 4 times the population of the United States, didn't manage that. India, with almost 4 times the population of the United States, they didn't manage that. And India's death toll has been, in fact, been extremely low. A country which has got a per capita income much, much lower than the United States has handled this far better. They've had a negligible number of deaths, 1.3 billion people, and they've only had about 100 coronavirus deaths. It's astonishing. And they've been willing to take it on the chin. Yeah, it's going to hurt the economy, but they're going to do it, and they're going to save a lot of lives. Perhaps the Indians have even overreacted, actually, because the number of people who've died from it has been a drop in the ocean in India, which I know is good, but you might say, well, we're willing to tolerate a couple of thousand deaths for the sake of keeping our economy going. Anyway, his dilatoriness in dealing with this has been extreme. He was warned in early January this was coming, it was going to be major, but he tarried. So he frittered away precious time, and so many other countries have handled this much, much better. Taiwan, South Korea, Iceland, to name just a few. You know, United Kingdom's handled it quite poorly. I give the UK government about 3 out of 10 for this, but it's been better than the United States. Just about everywhere has managed it better than the US. And the US just, in a way, had very few excuses. Being so wealthy, having some of the most advanced hospitals in the world, and, well, is really the White House screwed up. Maybe a few state governors, other state governors done quite well. So he was tardy, delaying on everything. Could have used that Defence Production Act to say, produce loads of ventilators, has hummed and hawed about that. Pentagon has various things they could distribute, but they're not being told where to distribute them. Not bringing in lockdown, then talking about reopening it, calling it a hoax at first. And, you know, believing Trump can be deadly, because some people say, oh, well, it doesn't exist. I'm not going to change my routine at all. And if you're elderly, if you're immunocompromised, if you've got some sort of pulmonary complaint, then obviously you're much more susceptible to this disease. And you're probably going to die of ignorance if you believe Trump. Expose yourself in public places. Expose yourself to those who've got it. Obviously, you can't tell who's got it. Are we to use masks? Trump has finally said that's a good idea. I don't think he's done anything to ensure there are enough masks around and personal protective equipment for doctors and nurses, having to use plastic bags, and saying you can use a scarf. A lot of people have scarves. He's saying it like that, scarves. And he's very fond of that phrase. A lot of people do this. A lot of people don't know. A lot of good people, a lot of bad people. Wow. So clever, Donald. The thing is, he hasn't noticed that words ending in F the F turns to a V when pluralized, as in wife, wives. He might know about that plural word, wives. He's had 3 of them. Anyway, so yeah, Trump and his cheerleader and his absolute abject sycophant Hannity saying it was a hoax. Wow. So Fox News very keen to kill its religious fundamentalist viewers who'll be going to church, praying for a cure because Jesus saves. Medicine doesn't, apparently. Nor indeed does common sense. So states can only do so much. And Trump was saying, well, it's up to the states. I don't have responsibility. Disclaiming responsibility. Get out of the White House then. Resign the presidency if you're not willing to take responsibility. The buck stops here, as Harry S. Truman said, saying that states should bid for ventilators. Well, they're bidding for them, as Governor Cuomo in New York has said. And so what does that do to the price? Goes up and up and up. Price gouging, profiteering. So some people are going to die avoidably just because their state is not as rich as another state. And if the federal government produced them, or could they pass some sort of law? Could they confiscate these things in with compensation? I don't know. It could have been sorted out. Way more could have been produced. Okay, I know, like factories in Italy, they say quadruple production, brought the military into work there, soldiers having to work on the assembly line, do whatever it takes to try and save people. And Italy, had hardcore lockdown, had a terrible situation. I think it's 13,000 deaths, but they have managed to get the infection rate and the death rate down. The number is falling. Not out of the woods yet, be far too premature to cry victory. It might be a blip and might start going up, but if we're lucky, it's going to start going down. It took about 2 months of the spread of this disease in Italy to reach the pinnacle and might be reducing. Maybe in about 2 months, Italy could go back to something close to normality. But if you dither, then it gets worse and worse, and it's just everywhere, and you just it's no longer containable. What a great idea it was to get them to bid for these ones and therefore raise the price. Now, some of these Republicans, they're hardcore free marketeers, not on drugs, oddly, or prostitution, or gambling, usually. I wonder why not. But so they presume they're okay with this, with people being priced out of the market. Is it okay to charge $1 billion for a ventilator? Or 10 million, or 100 million, or $1 billion? Why not? There's the laws of supply and demand. If that's all that matters, not human need, not saving lives, why would you object? So it's strange. There's some lacunae in this free market attitude where, oh no, we can't have free trade on that one. We can't possibly have big government, but yes, we'll have the $2 trillion stimulus package. Why this huge anomaly? The stimulus packages are acceptable sometimes, and in 2008, and under Ronald Reagan. Anyway, Trump could hardly have done worse. Belatedly, there may been some good sense out of the White House, but not enough to undo the so many cardinal errors in the earlier part of this crisis. There was that U.S. Navy captain who was demoted for warning of coronavirus on the aircraft carrier, that something's got to be done about it, that the U.S. Navy is not taking it seriously enough, calling him an alarmist for sounding the alarm when it needed to be sounded. Now, did he deliberately leak it to the media? I don't know, actually. It certainly ended up in the hands of the mainstream press. But he went outside the chain of command. But if the chain of command is doing nothing, and American sailors are dying completely needlessly, should he take action? Perhaps that's worth it for the sake of saving the lives of his men and women. And he said, this is not a war. If it were a combat situation, he would accept some deaths, but not when it's completely avoidable. So, precipitate and decisive action could preclude many deaths. It's not having zero risk. We can't achieve that. But we can mitigate the risk that there is. So coming on to his psychopathy, is it innate? I'm not sure. You could look at his brother, well, the one who died of alcoholism. Don't know that much about him, or his sister. I don't think there are any symptoms in them, but just because they weren't psychopathic at all doesn't mean that he's not, or his mother or his father, from what I can read about them. Could have had a brain injury early in life. This can explain it. Damage to the frontal lobe. It can be to do with childhood trauma, cruel, abusive, cold, distant parents, something like that, craving their approbation. I don't think so. Seems to have had a fairly good relation with his father, who left him so much money. He clearly had affection for his mother, and that's why Scotland, probably the only place outside the United States that he's quite fond of. We talk about Russia. He's only been to Russia once ever, so far as I know, for 36 hours. Scotland he's been to repeatedly, owning golf courses there, Okay, I know that's where golf was invented, but not that much of a lucrative market. Obviously, he's got no head for business. That's why he's gone bankrupt 4 times and lost billions and billions on all these white elephant projects. But anyway, it seems that there was some emotional purchase his mother had on him. So childhood not that unhappy, didn't really feel it rejected. I'm guessing it's in his DNA. Read a bit of Bob Hare on psychopaths, how they are uncontrollable, and nobody else is more out of control than Trump. A bit of a Gollum figure, but who's made him like this? So continuing his destructive harlequinade around the White House and indeed the world. So I'm suggesting he's a subclinical psychopath. I don't think he's not a serial killer. Obviously, they've been fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. He just ordered airstrikes and things like that. So, yeah, he's ordered some enemy fighters to be killed. That's in the normal course of things. Every president's done that. I wouldn't say that makes him psychopathic. And, yeah, some civilians have been killed. He's been quite reckless about that. But anyway, I don't think he's been egregiously bad on that one. But where I'm saying he's psychopathic is leaving such destruction in his wake, economically, or in terms of coronavirus, or the chaos he's caused in the White House with this very high turnover of staff, with the constant lying, complete indifference to climate change, or all the other harm he does, or his serial infidelities, which he then was boasting about and insisting that tabloids put on the front page. So he's never pricked by conscience. That's what's psychopathic about him. He's completely untroubled about the harm that he wreaks on other people, and he's wrought a lot of damage to his minions. Loyalty is strictly a one-way street with him. You will be cast aside the moment you no longer serve a purpose for him. You are an instrument to be picked up and discarded. That's it. Is completely unsentimental about other people. So he's remorseless. That's another thing, is no expressions of regret, no twinge of guilt about the harm he does to other people. He never apologizes. The closest he ever came is when Megyn Kelly, remember, she asked him a worthwhile question. As a half-decent journalist, you have to put challenging questions to politicians, right? That's your job, not to be fawning like Sean Hannity. And when she asked him a decent question, she was accused by him of bleeding out of her wherever, riding the crimson wave, to suggest she's suffering from premenstrual tension just because she was a passable journalist. And then he claimed that was not an allusion to menstruation, didn't suggest what it was an allusion to. So insulting the public's intelligence. Anyway, when she brought that up with him later, he said, "Excuse me," in that sort of tone, that manner. So it was flagrantly insincere. He's utterly shameless. That "excuse me" was the poorest excuse for an apology that I've ever seen. So when he's losing it, when he's ranting and he's irate, that's the real Trump. I think we saw the display mode Trump through the 90s into the noughties, and then recently, perhaps as he's losing his mind, as he's experiencing senility, he can no longer control himself. That's why he's flying off the handle. Anyway, mammon worship, that would be another example. Abasing himself to the mighty, suck up, kick down. That's absolutely him. These are various other personality disorders or just disagreeable traits. His complete indifference to the suffering of others in other countries. People want to better themselves in the United States. Fulminating against ethnic minorities. Disseminating racial hatred. Wishing harm on others so much. Behaving terribly despite what it does to others. So thrill-seeking. He craves adulation. Recognition. Is always me. Always trying to aggrandize himself. There's this desire to win at all costs, with absolutely no holds barred, no ethical considerations, no regard for veracity, no regard for legality, and thinks he can just get away with anything, overestimating his intelligence, always banging on about his intelligence. His Fifth Avenue principle: I could shoot someone dead on Fifth Avenue in broad daylight and get clean away with it. And that's more or less what he's been trying to do. Not kill people, but constantly committing crimes in the open and getting away with it, and telling people to disobey subpoenas from Congress, not to release documents they're supposed to. So he's got this propensity to injure others. and doesn't give a damn about people who don't get paid, people who pay tens of thousands of dollars for a degree which is worthless, completely fraudulent. So he's an opportunist. If something better comes along, he'll drop one thing. He was a Republican in the 80s, then a Democrat, then a Republican. He was a friend of the Clintons. Now he absolutely spits blood at the name of Clinton, and on and on. So there's no consistency about the views he espouses, because he doesn't believe in those. He doesn't disbelieve in them either. He ghosts people. There's a bit of Meghan Markle in him in that way. I'm sure the two wouldn't favour the comparison, the way that people are disposable, and that they're just jettisoned as soon as they can no longer be exploited, with his wives, with his friends, with his political allies. So that's why people have ended up in jail, felt very sorry for these people in jail, going to pardon them. No, it actually did pardon them. So using and abusing people, always been so delinquent and indisciplined. And these are bad characteristics to have, and someone who should care about people, who should take his job extremely seriously. This coronavirus obviously is a matter of death for hundreds of thousands of people. And saying it's like the flu, and the flu in the United States, he's saying it kills an average 60,000 people per annum, right? But we don't shut down. Well, yeah, that's true. But your own government's estimate, the lowest death toll the United States is going to experience is 100,000 from this coronavirus, yeah, which is in addition to the 60,000 who die from flu. Now, people ought to take reasonable precautions about influenza, particularly if they're one of the more vulnerable groups, like elderly, or immunosuppressed or something like that, or have some respiratory complaint already, like wrapping up warm, avoiding too much social contact, boosting your immune system with vitamin C and I can't think, was it cinnamon or ginger? These things help. Maybe getting a flu jab. Yeah, you would do all that, as we would take reasonable precautions proportionate to the danger posed by this. So that's best case scenario, 100,000 dead in the United States. Medium case scenario would be like 500,000 and could be considerably higher. We'll see. But that's the thing, is you hope for the best and prepare for the worst. That's what precautions are, because it might be rather worse than we estimated. I realize it is possible to overreact and sometimes to be too hasty. Very few countries have been that way. So there's been this constant braggadocio from him, which is part of his psychopathy. He rends the skies, going on about his fantastic numbers, make America great again. What a great, cemetery? Maybe that's what he's trying to do. An attention addict. Okay, he's always got to be out there, always speaking drivel, even if he has no idea what he's talking about. So there's all this furphy he's saying about how fabulously he's handled this, or previously remember how it wasn't remotely serious, it was nothing to worry about, move on. So he'll mouth the words compassion for people, but there's obviously no feeling behind them. You see when he is really emotional, he emotes about things that are dear to him when he's furious because he feels he's been slighted. Like when he espouses Republican principles or Christianity, that's just hot air, right? He pays lip service to these shibboleths because he needs to for his own advancement. Likes boasting a lot about his numbers. Yeah, there's a lot to boast about. The highest number of corona cases in the world, and the highest curve, steepest curve, and quite soon with the highest number of deaths. I predict within 3 days overtake Spain for death toll, within a week overtake Italy for death toll. Now, some countries like Iran probably significantly underreporting, and Russia are probably lying. Well, so take that into account. And okay, it could be 10 times higher than we actually think. But even then, I'm pretty sure the United States is going to outstrip Iran. So prompt and decisive action would have been far better. Then you can have a shorter quarantine and growth can return. Like Iceland hasn't even had to close restaurants, bars, shops and so on because they were so effectual in tracking it down, in setting detectives on this case and these sleuths. They found who the people were, found who they've been in contact with, isolated them, all the rest of it. South Korea likewise. There was a really smart way to do this, and the economy could go quite well. So if we're fortunate, France and Italy are finally beating it. Spain is still very bad. Yeah, and so Trump was obviously got no humility, not humble enough to look around the world for best practice and to learn for that. Just gut instinct, believing what he wanted to believe, wishful thinking, magical thinking. It was completely moronic. Belarus is still jocund, as in they got everything opening, carrying on regardless, as though it's not happening. They've admitted to only 4 coronavirus deaths, but notably there's been a spike in pneumonia deaths in Belarus, unseasonable pneumonia deaths now that we're like end of spring. On the other hand, okay, if you already got pneumonia, corona might come and finish you off. So it wouldn't be completely a lie if this cause of death is pneumonia. So that's what's so psychopathic about him: his complete indifference to others, and his desire to get more and more and more for himself. Just has no sense of right and wrong, completely untroubled by morality. So he's vile, and bizarrely, the most moralistic people are the ones who go for him. But anyway, this disease may well finish off many of them. Please check out my poetry channel, British Poesy it's called. I might put a link below. I can't find a search term where it'll come up. Toodaloo.